So I felt led to document the hero's journey that I went through over the course of a year and a half. It started on my birthday month in 2017 when I met Alex, and this is up to this point right now, which is November of 2018. So a year and a half of quite an ascension process, a lot of transcending happening. And I'm remembering that right before I met him, and I sensed I was going to be meeting him because always something really significant happens on you, like when I was 27, 37, and in that year I turned 47 in 2017. So, and we happen to both be Pisces too and have lots of Capricorn in our chart. I think it's worthy of documenting this experience because it was so profound for me. We have a karmic relationship because we're karma cousins. When I draw the destiny cards, that's what we are, which is a more positive karmic relationship than karma cards. We're karma cousins. So he was supposed to benefit me basically through karma, and anyway, it was a mixed bag. But I also noticed that a lot of the twin flame experiences that are described like on YouTube, where there's just lots of drama and separation and reconnection and chasing and fleeing, or all these certain concepts, it was very much so what we experienced. And it gave me an opportunity to basically have really no other recourse than to show up as unconditional love. It tested me to the core. I had to deal with concepts like abandonment, betrayal, lying, cheating, him leaving multiple times, even to go try to get back with his ex. So it was just way more drama than I was used to or have ever had to go through any of that kind of stuff before. But this is the thing. Right before I met him, I basically said to God, I said, God, I've been a sovereign, independent woman my whole life. I've dated here and there, but nobody's super serious that I felt was like marriage material or long-term material. I didn't feel like any of them were the one. And so I typically dated just, so that I could have some practice around relationship communication skills, relationship skills. And I said, God, I feel like I've kind of come as far as I can on my own. And, it just seems to me like bringing in my life partner would be the next step for me in my evolution. Only, I was specifically requesting that it be the one, my life partner. And I'm not so convinced of that. I mean, I guess it may not be over yet, but right now he feels more like a karmic, which they say oftentimes the karmic shows up before the real one shows up. And I can say that, thank God, what I do have to take away from all the trauma that did happen is that, I got really clear on my boundaries, what I'm willing to put up with, what I'm not, what I'm looking for, what I'm not, being open to even just living in separate houses to keep it fresh. Just learned how to protect myself financially because I didn't at first, and I really got slammed and things like that. So I feel very prepared on many levels, just kind of having to get street smart about some things. And so anyway, it's kind of funny because this was very much so a spiritual experience and a kind of a destined experience because of the karma involved. So this is not something I would normally put up with, this kind of behavior from any man. A lot of it was, like I said, like a hero's journey that I had signed up for. Had no idea what I was signing up for, though. I thought he was the one. And that almost had to be part of the story because I don't think I would have been as committed and dedicated and so into it and so present to it and everything, you know, if it wasn't. If I knew what I was really getting into, I just would have lost interest immediately. But I think that was part of the illusion for me, that almost God had to create that so that I would be enrolled. So crazy. So it's funny how there's, you know, perfection in the imperfection, right? So in documenting this, you know, this person seemed, I guess, you know, because I feel very comfortable with my integrity and my, yeah, I guess integrity is really the bottom line. I just kind of, I guess, my worldview, and having grown up very spiritual, and like, to me, spirituality goes hand in hand with integrity. Well, for some people it doesn't. So he's a very interesting mixture of characteristics, very much a mixed bag. So a lot of times, you know, he has a lot of these things to bring to the table, but then he has these other things that are so, like, not ready for partnership. There's just no way. To me, if you don't have your integrity in place, you don't really have anything. And that was an issue with him. So I had to learn that over the course of things, and kind of learn who he was through experience, and kind of size up the situation. And it took a while because, like I said, there's such a mix of characteristics that didn't seem like they went together, in my mind at least, of how my paradigm works. So, you know, the big connection was that, you know, spiritually we really connected. Like, he was one of the first men in my life that actually seemed to be on the same page spiritually, and we could talk for hours about it. And we had that resonance with conversation that was always very interesting. And he actually taught me a lot around, you know, what's really going on the planet, politically, economically, you know, on all these levels that I was totally clueless to, because I wasn't really into the news or anything like that, for a good reason, because that's not the truth. They just feed you in the news what they want you to believe. But anyway, it took me a while to size things up, but it's just interesting how, you know, I pretty much went through a process of having to transcend these very painful things. And, you know, it's our tendency, I think, to take things personally, and when really they have nothing to do with this. You know, his behavior has everything to do with who he is, and it doesn't really seem to matter who I am, because I feel like I showed up in the most conscious, Piscean, ascended way that I could have ever shown up in this experience. Being unconditional love, and being forgiving, and working with him, and basically being his life coach for 1.5 years, which was very demanding. He was a handful, and I was giving a lot of energy to him, and it wasn't really coming back to me equally by any means. I wasn't getting the same kind of attention and investment from him, because he was in so much drama. It seemed like he needed a lot of support. And anyway, you know, I thought I knew him, and he comes off, I think, really generous at first. But then, you know, when it came right down to it, and he, I guess, made some poor financial choices, he left me at one time with $500 to my name and cleaned out the account and left to try to go get back with his ex. And I was just like, really? That's who you are? Like, it was just astonishing to me. I've never had somebody leave me for someone else, first of all. Of course, they have, you know, a 25-year history and 3 children and all that stuff. So I totally understood just wanting to stick with what he had, which was a good situation. And I didn't even know that he was still, I don't know, he told me the story that it was over a long time ago and they were separated and all that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even gotten involved. But at any rate, gosh, in the course of this 1.5 years, I dealt with all these serious things, you know, like feeling abandoned, like, wow, you must not really want to save this relationship at all, or value me very much if you're going to leave me with $500 to my name, which was so much worse than how I started. And I had used all my credit, you know, for like the automatic payments, just regular bills, thinking he would reimburse me, which he fought me on, and I was shocked. It left me in a really horrible position, and it made me realize, wow, I did not protect myself. I didn't even know I needed to. And, you know, the whole betrayal of, oh my gosh, you know, I had a wonderful family and marriage, and I messed up, and, you know, trying to go back to her. And this happened multiple times, going back to Canada to try to get back with his wife. And like I said, I've never had anybody leave me for someone else. So it was like, wow, because, you know, I'm a relationship coach. I have a lot of relationship skills, a lot of communication skills. I was life coaching him the whole way through. I'm very confident as to who I am and what I have to offer. So it was like, wow, if you're going to leave me, it's probably a sign that you're not really clear on my value, you know. But I understood it at the same time. So that's what's so fascinating about this. I understood his need to reconcile with his wife and kids because he had left them and they got traumatized. They weren't quite ready for him to leave and move on with his life. And, you know, he had it pretty good with them. And he was just like in his own zone of just needing to get out of that environment and really heal. And I think he wasn't seeing clearly. So anyway, you know, from those kind of themes to, I think mainly like the hardcore one that hurt is just feeling like he didn't really understand my value, that he was willing to leave me kind of stranded like that financially, because he had me close down my business in order to go into this, what was we believed to be this twin flame relationship of, oh, we're going to spend the rest of our lives together, and, you know, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for 47 years. I've been holding space for my beloved, and here he is. At least that was my belief. So he totally, you know, bought into that story. And then I realized that I think he was just doing what met his needs in the moment. I think he just kind of led me on. But at any rate, you know, and then this divorce just dragged on, right? And it's like, you know, reminded me, never get involved with someone who's going through a divorce and who's not complete with their past relationship, because then they're not able to show up for the present new relationship. And for me, this was a big deal because I had waited and held off for a long time, just being independent, sovereign woman, until my beloved showed up. So to have him show up in this way was very heartbreaking and disappointing. It was definitely not my version of the way I wanted my story to go. It was so not romantic. And so, you know, I was crushed when he wanted to go back and try to reconcile with his ex and fix what he had done. And yet I understood it too. So, you know, I said, well, I support you in doing that, and I'll help you do that, and coached him through it. And I think the damage had been done too badly at that point. So anyway, there was just a lot of things that I observed over that year and a half that were just kind of like all your typical traumas that you may go through over a course of time, you know, in your relationships. And it's like it all showed up in that year and a half with this one relationship. And it basically got me really clear on what I'm not going to deal with. You know, sometimes when you've dealt with something like someone flip-flopping a lot or lying and then catching them in their lies and then finding out more information, like at the end I caught, I didn't even do it consciously or plan on it or anything. It just happened where I saw that he had a text. I was using his phone to call in an order, and I found this text from this woman, and they were texting, and then I saw emails of him talking with women, and I'm like, really? Now that's something you do too? And so it was just like, God, I keep finding out more and more things about this person that makes me feel like I don't know him at all. Like, he's a very good actor and, you know, acts like he's on board and agrees with you all the time. But then when it comes right down to it, he wasn't really willing to do the deep work, because at the end, I basically said, you know, I'm tired of dealing with this divorce situation. It was supposed to be done a long time ago. And, you know, you can't really show up in our relationship until that one's complete. So I really just want you to go complete it, and then we can reassess at that point, because this isn't working for me, and I don't really feel comfortable being sexual with someone who's married to someone else still, technically. And I also said, you know, I've shown up for you for a year and a half. It's time for you to show up for me. You know, I've been traumatized by all these things that he had done. And I said, you know, this needs to be a balanced partnership where you show up for me too. And he basically said no and walked away. And that was very telling. And then it was after that that I found out, since I had him leave, then he was texting and emailing other women. And it's like, wow, okay, this is someone who's definitely not, I don't think, in love with me, because he didn't fight for me. And he was willing to just go to other women immediately to meet his needs. So, you know, it was very telling. But the glory of this whole trauma story is I did learn a lot of boundaries. When we did break up, or he would go away to try to reconcile with his wife, I made it really clear upon re-entering my life that there were certain things that needed to be in place. One of them was that the divorce would be complete, which still didn't happen, so I had to call him out on it. But I did say this time, you know, you need to put some money up so that I'm not just left with $500 to my name if you choose to leave again. I'm not going to do that. So I need to have a nest so that I feel okay if you just walk out. And I also had him address my family and friends who were confused at this point, and like, it's all back and forth so much. Had him address them as to what was going on with us and our story. And so I really had thought that there was a reconciliation and we were going to move on at that point for good. And then, you know, this other stuff happened where he just really wasn't willing to do the deep work, you know, and invest in me and really do what he needed to do. And I said, you need to stand up to the plate. Otherwise, this is an imbalanced relationship where I'm basically providing you a lot of support and then my needs don't get met. So that became really clear to me at the end. And so anyway, that's where it stands. And it's just for me, it's fascinating because I went through such an intense hero's journey in such a short period of time. I mean, some women maybe go through all those things over the course of their life with maybe different partners, and for some reason for me it just all showed up at once, and it felt like it was kind of like God's way of getting me prepared in each of the areas that I wasn't quite ready yet. And I did say, you know, God, this feels like my next step in evolution, in my evolution that needs to happen. And so he basically, it feels like, just sort of set up all these situations within my relationship with Alex to get me wised up, I guess, in certain ways that I otherwise just trusted, you know, and learned how to protect my finances. The fact that my credit is completely gone and completely messed at this point is amazing, because I've always had excellent credit my whole life. But, you know, I took the risk because I thought he was the one. So I invited him to come stay with me, knowing how high rents are in Maui. I just thought, well, what's the point in paying 2 rents? Because, you know, if he's having me let go of my business, which, you know, as a Tantra and relationship expert, then he's going to be paying the bills, and so there's no point in him paying for my rent and then renting something else. It was just a choice I made to make it sustainable, and it was a risk for sure that, you know, was tough, because I have this kind of studio apartment and it's tight quarters to have all of a sudden somebody in my space, because I'm used to living alone and having a lot of downtime. So that was quite an adjustment, and we did amazingly well under the circumstances. And yet, you know, there were times when we were at odds that I just needed him to leave, because it just felt really uncomfortable, like I was with a stranger all of a sudden. So I'm just so grateful that I survived that, because it got me to the core of, all those typical PTSD traumatic themes of abandonment and betrayal and the lying and the cheating and whatnot. And it's so funny because in the course of it, his ex and I became friends and reached out to each other, and really were able to compare notes to see what the truth really was, since he tended to lie quite a bit. Sometimes we just needed to see what's really going on here, because he would tell her one thing and me another, and we got kind of privy to his patterns. And it's just so amazing how someone can be so spiritual and in some ways, and so educated in things that are really unique, and yet so kind of off course in other ways, like his integrity, or try to come off as a certain kind of man, but then deep down, when he got backed into a corner, this other person would come out that was a little bit more narcissistic or self-serving or superficial, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, very fascinating experience. So I definitely feel more like I've been around the block a little bit more, because it was a very deceptive, kind of illusionary relationship where you think you know somebody, and I didn't. Even my intuition wasn't telling me that I needed to guard against him or in any way. I mean, he kind of has this teddy bear, easygoing way about him, and yet, God, what a handful he turned out to be. What like a train wreck in some ways. To lie or be out of integrity means that everything falls apart. Trust is broken, and then it's really hard to want to continue with someone has that kind of behavior. So anyway, that's my story. I can say that I feel like I pass all my tests of the hero's journey with flying colors. I'm trained in NVC, and I handled everything so well, and I really showed up and supported him in whether he wanted to go back to his wife or whatever. All the stuff he was going through, all this healing he was trying to accomplish, supported him in a lot of it, and got him plugged into Mankind Project and NVC and all these things to, help him. And kind of had to realize at a certain point, it's funny because I actually told Spirit, I said, I'm feeling complete. I'm not really seeing this. I have a hard time believing this person's my true twin flame. He's just too far behind me in certain ways. And, how could that be my partner? And Spirit said, for right now, he's supposed to be your partner because you're not quite done yet. And then there was this last, 2-month period recently where we actually became vegan and kind of stepped up our whole health and exercise regime, and started taking these early morning walks every morning in addition to our other workouts. And so there were some things that were accomplished still, learning in this last 2 months period, but I had kind of already figured out that it just didn't seem like this was my true partner. But Spirit was like, no, just hang in there a little bit longer. And then it's like it kind of fell apart once the rubber met the road. And so here I stand with that much more experience now and understanding of a lot of the things that women can go through, or men, even with women, if the roles are reversed, to bring to my practice of relationship coaching. There's just so much that goes into relationship, and I've definitely been around the block a lot with this. And it's important to experience these things to be a truly effective relationship coach, because otherwise it's just all in theory, and if you haven't really gone through it yourself, then it's kind of hard to relate to clients. And I specifically realized and and own that I chose. I said, God, this is my next step of evolution, to be in a deep committed partnership that's monogamous, to see what that's like, and to see if that works for me, and to see what doesn't work for me about it, and like maybe where I need to shift, and make sure I don't lose myself, and I'm able to stay in my power and not compromise too much, and become like my mom in some ways, where that was the role model, and I saw myself kind of become her a little bit in certain ways, and had to catch myself, only because it's the only time I ever let a man really come live with me, and that's a very different experience than just having a boyfriend that you see several times a week, and it's just a totally different dynamic altogether. It's a totally different ball game. So anyway, I just felt led to share my experience, hoping that it brings some light to yours. For those of you who have gone through pretty tumultuous experiences like that, it's so easy to get caught up in the 3D version of what's actually happening, like, oh my God, I've just been abandoned, or I just got betrayed, or he just cheated on me, or I just caught him in a lie. And yet what happened is that, with the Spirit's help, I was reminded that, there's more to the story than just what's happening on a 3D level, that there's a bigger perspective if I kind of go into 5D version and look at it from like a bird's eye view, and get a different perspective as to like, why is this showing up for me right now? This is an opportunity for me to heal this same kind of concept that I had with my dad, or growing up. And what does this truly mean? Does it really mean anything about me, or is it really more, I'm an adult now with the skills to handle these things, instead of being a child that just sort of got traumatized as a child, that I, as an adult, have all the skills to be able to navigate it and dance with it in such a way that I realize that it really doesn't have to do with me. It's really his stuff, that it says more about him than me, and I showed up beautifully and passed that test awesomely. And I can say one of the biggest gifts that came from it was seeing myself. I got to really experience and see myself in such a conscious way, like, it really shows your character when you're at your most stressful, and especially financially, being so undermined like I was. It's like, that's one of a lot of people's biggest fears, just like to be kind of left out on the street. And it's like, oh my God, what now? How am I going to pay my bills and start over and all that? And there's something in me that just knew I was going to be okay. And somehow it all worked out. But I really got to see myself just handle this stuff so well. And it gave me, a really clear daily experience of who I am and how I show up, and how I am in my own integrity, no matter how the other person shows up in their integrity, and got really clear on just, how strong I am, and how well I just handled everything. And that's the beauty of NVC as well, which is nonviolent communication. We tend to call it compassionate communication now, but when someone does something that you consider to be wrong or sinful or whatever, if you actually are willing to look at their behavior or action in light of their needs, and like, what needs are they trying to fulfill through this, it really shifts the focus. Because, sure, he did a lot of things that made him look bad, and that really undermined his ability to have me or his ex as a partner, because why would we want to partner with someone who's acting like this? And yet I was able to understand, just knowing him and kind of learning who he is, that in his mind, like when she and I both cut him off, he was probably in that moment of, oh, who do I reach out to now? And he reached out to some friends that were women, and probably got involved with one or more of them. as an interim kind of thing, because he was feeling like, oh my God, I just lost everything. And he did. He lost, in a sense, both of us, and lost his family, and lost a lot of things, you know, because of his choices that were not very conscious and really undermined trust. So I can understand that, you know, he was just trying to meet his needs for connection and just to feel like he wasn't alone in the world. And it doesn't explain it away, but it does help to kind of understand that, you know, if I was in that position, or if I were him, I understand why he chose what he chose, you know. And it helps me to just realize that that's just where he is in his development, and that those are the choices he's likely to make. And it's just amazing to be able to transcend, I guess, instead of just making him wrong and, I guess, kicking him out many times like I did and could have, like, just shut him out forever. You know, I actually chose to continue with spirit on this process until it was complete, and that I was able to get, you know, milk all the gems from it that I was supposed to, so that I am ready for that partnership that's showing up in 2019 here, coming up next. So I actually feel very grateful for that experience.